Hello and welcome. I'm Psychic Medium Roberto, and I truly hope you're doing well today. In today's episode of Mystery Psychic Files, I'm going to be looking at the disappearance of flight MH370 with the focus on, was this a political act that these passengers and crew members had to endure? So the focus will be on looking if it's political, and yeah, what a tragic event, losing all of these people during this flight. All right, let me take a moment to focus and tune in. Just a brief background. I'm sure everyone knows about this case. On March the 8th, 2014, flight MH370 disappeared off radars. And to present day, which is now the 1st of March 2023, the disappearance is still a mystery. Of course, there has been some debris that has been found over the years, and but still no concrete outcome of what actually happened to this flight. And of course, the flight recorders have not been found at this stage. So just a brief background. The flight was traveling from Indonesia, Kuala Lumpur, and of course lost signal over the South China Sea. And of course there are many theories as to where the plane ended up. Near Australia in the Indian Ocean is the likely destination, and I concur with that as well. I do see it at the bottom left hand side of Australia. But the focus for today is to look at the pilots involved, as well as the president of Malaysia and Malaysian Airlines, to determine what was actually going on during this horrific flight. All right, so who were the two pilots on board? So we have the Captain Zahiri Ahmad Shah, and we have the first officer Farik Hamid. And looking at both these numbers, so let's start with the captain, born July 31, 1961. That gives the 748. Now I would just say, looking at the top line, I would say these are the necessary numbers for being a pilot, particularly 7, particularly the 4, and of course the 8, which would be an understanding of engineering and mechanics. The 7 is all about aviation, flight, and the 4, when someone has a 4, they're very meticulous, very facts driven, very particular about data, and that is obviously very important for being a pilot. However, what concerns me about the captain, when you have the outcome in that day, 11-2, so when he comes home every day, he has been the 11-2. And of course, from a decision-making point of view, as a captain, head of the flight crew, you have all these passengers, responsible for all these passengers with that 11-2. It's all about decision-making, bringing people safely home. And again, of course, it does also lend itself to, is this person of sound mind? Because that can also turn and become a very negative 11-2, where laws can be broken. And that 8 in the date of birth as well can be very aggressive, very violent, very outbursty, very vocal. We saw that with the navigator, with the Amelia, also got the 8. Under normal circumstances, if everything's going well, those 8's very balanced. It's about balance as well, from a personal psychological point of view. But once you tip those scales, those 8's can be very loud, throwing the toys out the cot, being very vocal. Why me? Why me? What about the other people? And when we get that 10-1 outcome, for me, look, 10-1, yeah, definitely an organizational man. Will go by the rules and regulations set out by the organization. So in other words, having been employed by Malaysia Airlines, he would follow protocols. However, that 10-1 also speaks about political ideology, It talks about political movements. It talks about groups of people. And unfortunately, with that 10-1 outcome, yeah, you know, it's almost like the captain starts well with all the correct numbers, but once you're dealing with the inner core of a human being, you know, apart from their career and their day job, you know, everyone else has their own thoughts on political issues, economic issues, and in this case, I believe the captain very much prone to political issues with that 10-1, and unfortunately, we are going to see that play out as we go into the reading. So if we see, absolutely. All right, so let's have a look here. Now, here is the slide, I believe, with the role players involved. We have the captain, the first officer. Then in the middle, I've included Malaysia, born August 31, 1957. We also have the Prime Minister at the time, Mr. Mohammed, with his date of birth, as well as Malaysian Airlines, born May 1, 1947. So I've just looked at the day before the day of the event, March 8, and then March 9, the day after. So these are always revealing, just, you know, spreading out the range or opening up the range to see exactly what was going on during this time. So if we start on March 7, 2014, this would have been the day before. And in my opinion, we see that 10-1, by the end of the day, 10-1, there was definitely political issues going on. And of course, some of the documentaries alluded that there was someone being captured or being held prisoner or was about to be arrested. There was political turmoil in the country. And that 10-1 tells me there were definitely political issues going on in the country. And it was in the air and palpable by the time the sun set on March the 7th. Okay. Now, that 17-8 on the outcome there, very alarming. Now, I would say very alarming in the context of the situation with this plane going down, right? So for me, that outcome was already known. So 17-8. Now, we should also appreciate that the plane took off in the early hours just after midnight, March 8, 2014. Or let's just say at least past midnight, the plane was already going to be taking off, right? So around about 1 a.m., I believe, or round about there, but certainly past midnight. So that tells me then by the end of the day, March 7, where we have that 17-8 outcome. So technically the crew as well as the passengers would have already been at the airport by the end of March 7. So that 17-8 outcome now really plays a significant role in that 10-1 pings directly on the captain, okay, with his political and ideology in the background, in his subconscious, always present, always on his mind. And I believe this would have been premeditated. Now, it's easy to say that because this is obviously kind of a retrospect 2020 hindsight look into the situation. And we do know that on the flight simulator of the captain, he had plotted this course already and was already practicing on this. So there's the evidence there. I mean, you can't get more evidence than that, right? But it's interesting to note here that how these numbers played out and the sequences of events based on what we know from physical evidence. And I believe that 17-8 was already premeditated by 10-1 that night when he arrived at the airport to his job. He knew exactly what he was going to do. Okay, there was a plan in mind. Now, let's just also say that, or let's do this. Let's go to March 8. I'll bring in what I was going to say, and that was when sometime after the takeoff, the pilot was doing circles over the South China Sea, right? So, and a lot of people believe that while he was doing that, and I believe it was for just over 20 minutes or 22 minutes, was the actual negotiation going on between him, Malaysian Airlines, and wanting to bring the president in. Okay. Now we'll see the president there, born July 23, 1953, with the outcome 3. Okay, ever present every day, more so very prevalent the day after the crash, March 9. We see the 12-3 there. So president definitely involved. There would have been communication between Malaysian Airlines, of course, because you'd be speaking directly through them, as well as bringing in the president because it was a political issue, right? So what we're seeing on that day, so from midnight till 6 a.m., the top line 3, 8, and 7. Okay, so that's what was going on before the sun rose that morning, March 8. Okay, and the 3 is, so I believe there was a standoff between the number 3, which is the president, and 8, which pings on the captain, and that's also about communication, talking backwards and forwards. About 7. Now the 7 pings directly on Malaysia, the country, with the outcome 7. But I believe in this case, it also included the freedom of a prisoner. 7 represents freedom or lack of freedom, being trapped, being captured. And I believe this was the situation, that the captain was using the airline with the passengers. So in other words, a hijacking had occurred, which is also the 7, and was being negotiated with the 8, so communication, to Malaysian Airlines, and we see the outcome 9, and the day ends in an outcome 9. And I believe that the theory behind the pilot circling for 20 odd minutes or 22 minutes was the time where the negotiations were going on. Now he does do more circling later on in the flight path, but I think that initial 22 minutes was him trying to negotiate what was going on. Now, by the time they lost the actual communication, time from takeoff to that point was approximately 16 minutes. So it was approximately 16 minutes. And I believe, unfortunately, he would have starved the plane of oxygen. And I believe the passengers would have passed sometime from the time they took off to the time that we lost radio signal. They will already have passed after doing the 22 minutes of circling. Those passengers were already dead, unfortunately. Okay, sorry to say. And also, unfortunately, I did pick up an image of the pilot, the captain, as well as the first officer having almost like a fight brawl in the front there. And of course, the captain had overpowered the first officer, but I do believe there was a bit of a scuffle when the first officer realized what was happening. So what do we have there? We have the 11, 2, and the 7. That is all about negotiation. And of course, that negotiation did not go well. You know, we can understand the the philosophy a lot of governments do have, and that is, if a country has been held to ransom with kidnapping or, in this case, hijacking, once countries start buckling to terrorist threats or threats where there's kidnappings involved, most countries will not deal with that lightly and will not give in to any ideologies or misgivings, let's say, from the captain. And I do just pick up a sense of him being very angry, actually, in that pilot seat. So he was the captain, but after being the captain, he was this political monster or political animal, we can say, in terminology in the political world, that he was trying to get his point across. And it was the Malaysian government with the president were not going to buckle to his demands. Okay, so when we have that 11, 2, 7, everything was hanging in the balance. And I would say by that stage with the 7, unfortunately, we have the 18-9. That 9 for me tells me, and that's what I wanted to look as well, that 9 is murder. This was definitely a murder-suicide mission. If the Malaysian government did not release the prisoner that the captain was requesting to be released. So, without a doubt, March 8, 2014 ends in a 9. That is murder. Murder-suicide. By number 10, 1, which is the captain. So, when we go to March 9, 2014, we have the 3, and that 9 is present first thing in the morning, of course, because when everyone woke up or did not sleep through the night, the issue was the plane going down, and that pings directly on Malaysian Airlines, the 9. But we still have, how can I put it? What's the correct word? Well, look, let's put it this way. The president with the 12, 3, and the 7 was definitely not going to budge. Was definitely not going to budge to the demands of the rogue captain, and I do believe the captain was responsible and not the first officer. Absolutely. And we'll see the 12, 3. Now, the elephant in the room is, of course, the Malaysian president with the aviation authorities from Malaysia could not go on and tell the public, sorry, we had a rogue captain who intentionally crashed the plane. And we see that the outcome of the day after, they knew. The Malaysian government and the Malaysian president knew exactly what was going on. And it was definitely, they would have known definitely by March 9 with that 1910-1 pings directly on the captain. And of course, if they had to admit that the pilot was the cause of the incident, in other words, had hijacked the plane and was threatening to kill everyone, that would have brought major lawsuits. And I believe, you know, that lawsuit would have crippled the airline, perhaps. You know, there were more than 227 people on board that would have had to be compensated. The families would have had to be compensated. I believe that would have crippled the airline. And I believe the order from the president with that 12-3 in the middle of March 9, the order was shut this thing down. No one is to know exactly what happened with the communication with the captain to the Malaysian Airlines, because that would have been a terrible, terrible lawsuit and definitely would have crippled the Malaysian Airlines. So, you know, short answer is yes, this was definitely political motivated. This was a pilot hell-bent on his ideologies and took the plane down trying to prove a point. And when his wishes were not met, he downed that plane. But again, I do believe he had already planned this already to down the plane, whether the prisoner was released or not. Okay? This guy had this planned already. When we see March 7 with that 17-8, he was already going to put this plane down. He knew it. When he greeted those passengers that morning and his crew, he knew he was going to down that plane. And it's unfortunate when you get these maniacal pilots that use the huge responsibility they hold in their hands with many, many souls on board, and would then go out and commit murder. So he committed murder, mass murder. And I believe that was the outcome. And of course, for the families involved here, you know, the presidency as well as the country took a stance. They weren't going to buckle to the captain's demands. However, I would say they are liable for the deaths of these passengers. They knew what the issue was, but even during that flight, But certainly by the end of March 9, they would have known exactly what this was all about and chose not to disclose it to the public. And the reason was a threat of a lawsuit. So in my opinion, this was a politically motivated crime where a captain took hostage all the passengers and murdered them, unfortunately. All right, so let me know what your thoughts are. I'd like to see your comments. If you haven't subscribed, please hit the subscribe button, hit the notification icon so you know when there are new episodes. And I would say stay safe and stay alert, and I'll see you in the next one.